The peak of any fighter's career is the moment when they have a real chance to make the biggest imprint on the history of mixed martial arts. That's the time to face the toughest opponents head-on, because only through such trials can greatness be reached. Still, not every athlete manages to use that window wisely. In some cases, injuries get in the way, like what happened with Cain Velasquez or Dominick Cruz. Sometimes, a fighter steps away at the top after carefully weighing all the pros and cons, much like Khabib did. And then there are situations where guys end up wasting the prime years of their journey. That's exactly what we're diving into today. Those stories where time and talent didn't quite align. Nate Diaz has always been a bit of a controversial figure, and throughout his pro career, his choices often raised eyebrows. But the main question, especially in the context of what we're talking about today, is this: why did he take so few fights after those iconic matchups with McGregor, right when he was at the height of his physical prime? Nate has always been a bit of an unpredictable figure, and throughout his pro career, many of his choices left people scratching their heads. But the main point relevant to today's topic is this: why did he step away from fighting almost entirely after his showdowns with McGregor, right when he was at the peak of his athletic prime? He had always been hit or miss in the cage and never exactly reached for the stars in terms of accolades. Still, he kept fans hooked with his raw authenticity and unapologetic attitude. With solid skills and a gritty style, he managed to deliver 2 high-level scraps against one of the sport's biggest names. But after that, he disappeared for nearly 3 years, holding out for the right deal from the higher-ups. At 30 years old, the exact moment when most fighters embrace tough challenges, Nate went quiet. He only resurfaced in 2019, shaking off the rust with a unanimous decision win over Anthony Pettis. Then came a big-money, high-profile matchup for the BMF title, where he was thoroughly outclassed by Jorge Masvidal. Later, he had a brief spark late in the fight against Leon Edwards and wrapped up his UFC run by choking out the legendary Tony Ferguson. It's tough not to wonder what Nate's career might have looked like if he'd stayed more active. He likely could have chased a real championship belt and cashed in way bigger paydays. Still, one hefty check did come his way at the very end, courtesy of YouTuber-turned-boxer Jake Paul, who outpointed Nate by unanimous decision. Chan Sung-young, better known as the Korean Zombie, kicked off his career way back in 2007. He fought across various promotions and against a wide range of opponents, slowly building up the experience needed to hang with top-tier competition. By 2011, he was already making waves in the UFC, stringing together wins in impressive fashion and quickly becoming a fan favorite thanks to his dynamic style. He submitted Leonard Garcia in the second round, knocked out Mark Hominick in the opening minute of the first, and then choked out Dustin Poirier in the fourth round of an all-out war. That streak earned him a shot at the featherweight title against Jose Aldo, a fight he ultimately lost in the fourth round. But that wasn't the real turning point of his journey. In October of 2014, Jung was scheduled to face Akira Corassani, but an injury forced him to pull out. Not long after, he was drafted into mandatory military service in South Korea. While Jung remained silent on his fighting future, his manager revealed that he hoped to return to the UFC after completing his 2-year service. In the end, Zombie didn't make his return until 2017, and from that point on, his results were mixed. He did manage to earn another title shot in 2022, but once again, he was stopped in the fourth round. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder how his path might have unfolded had military service not cut into his prime. Maybe he could have earned a rematch with Aldo. Maybe things would have gone differently. We'll never know. Nick Diaz's career has been nothing short of a roller coaster, full of dramatic highs and frustrating setbacks. At various points, he was on the verge of being cut from the UFC, caught up in a doping scandal, crowned champion in Strikeforce, then brought back to the UFC only to land in hot water again. Nick shared the cage with legends like BJ Penn, Carlos Condit, Georges St-Pierre, and Anderson Silva. His fight with Silva, in fact, came with a bizarre twist. The two faced off on January 31st, 2015, at UFC 183. While Silva was initially declared the winner, later testing revealed banned substances in his system. Nick didn't walk away clean either. He tested positive for marijuana. The result was overturned, and Diaz was handed a 5-year suspension. That punishment was later reduced to 18 months, but still, from 2015 until 2021, Nick didn't set foot in the octagon. That's a huge gap, and a tough pill to swallow, considering he always hovered close to title contention. Both Diaz brothers, Nick and Nate, have long been known for their fondness for marijuana, something that's hard to miss in open workouts and press events. In recent years, the UFC eased up its stance on weed, and many speculated that Dana White made that move in part because of the Diaz brothers. Maybe that was the push Nick needed. After 6 years away, he finally returned to the UFC. But it didn't go the way fans had hoped. He lost to Robbie Lawler and disappeared from the spotlight once again. Gregor Gillespie's journey began back in high school, where he took up freestyle wrestling and quickly made a name for himself. He became a two-time state champion among his age group and later took his talents to college, where he rapidly earned a reputation as a standout athlete with a full scholarship thanks to his success on the mat. Gillespie holds several impressive accolades. He was a 4-time All-American, earning that distinction as early as his freshman year, a rare feat. He also broke records with his win-loss ratio, ending his collegiate wrestling career with an outstanding 91.7% win rate. During his time in school, Gregor was likely one of the most promising young wrestlers in the entire country. But things took a dark turn. He struggled with alcohol and drifted into a rough patch. Fortunately, he managed to pull himself out of that spiral and decided it was time for a comeback. Around that time, he connected with people who introduced him to the MMA world. The idea was simple. He already had the kind of wrestling base most fighters could only dream of. All he needed was to learn how to strike. And truth be told, it's far easier to teach a grappler how to punch than to teach a striker how to wrestle. Within just 1 year, Gregor made his pro MMA debut while also working as a coaching assistant. He quickly built an impressive undefeated record of 13 wins and no losses. By 2019, he was one of the most intriguing names in the lightweight division. Had he beaten Kevin Lee in their bout, he might have earned himself a direct route to the lightweight top 5. But things didn't go as planned. He suffered a brutal first-round knockout loss, which cast some doubt over his rise. Still, Gregor bounced back with a sharp, calculated win over Diego Ferreira, then silence. Despite being relatively young and having only a single loss, which he had already avenged with a victory, Gillespie vanished from the fight scene. He had every chance to jump back into the title picture and remind the world of his elite potential. But for reasons still unclear, we never saw Gregor Gillespie in the octagon again. Rory MacDonald. After racking up 9 wins in his professional career, Rory MacDonald signed with the UFC. The Canadian made his promotional debut on January 11, 2010. 1 year later, in 2011, he faced Nate Diaz. Across all 3 rounds, Rory looked sharper and more composed than his opponent. In the 3rd round, he put on a clinic, landing 3 explosive suplex-style throws that clearly demonstrated his dominance. The fight ended in a unanimous decision win for MacDonald. In 2012, Rory earned another unanimous decision victory, this time over the legendary former 2-division UFC champion BJ Penn. At UFC 170, he faced Brazilian veteran Damian Maia and once again won by unanimous decision. Then, at UFC 174 in Vancouver, he repeated that result against Tyron Woodley. With that, MacDonald had stacked up an impressive resume filled with top-tier names. But in 2015, things took a turn. He lost a grueling war to Robbie Lawler, their second meeting, and followed that up with another loss in 2016, this time to Stephen Thompson. 2 losses in a row is never ideal for any fighter. But it wasn't the end of the road. He could have regrouped and made a fresh run in the UFC. Instead, MacDonald made the unexpected choice to sign with Bellator. It was a curious decision, especially considering what happened next. Tyron Woodley, whom Rory had previously defeated convincingly, went on to capture the UFC title. One can't help but wonder, if the Canadian had stayed put, could he have claimed UFC gold himself? It's entirely possible. After all, he was only 26 years old when he walked away from the biggest stage in the sport. Zabit Magomedshirpov Zabit stepped into the world of MMA on May 9, 2012, marking the start of what would become a fascinating yet unexpectedly brief career. By 2014, the Dagestani fighter began competing in the featherweight division under Russia's ACB promotion. Just 2 years later, he captured the organization's featherweight title. Following his championship win, Zabit moved to the United States, settling in New York, where he began training under the guidance of Mark Henry. In 2017, he signed a deal with the UFC. That September, he he made his promotional debut. His first opponent in the octagon was American fighter Mike Santiago. Zabit controlled the action and finished the fight in the second round via submission. Just 3 months later, he squared off with Brazilian prospect Cain Velasquez. Another dominant showing, capped off with a submission victory in the third round. Both performances earned him bonuses for Performance of the Night. On March 2, 2019, Zabit faced veteran Jeremy Stephens at another UFC event. The fight took place in Las Vegas, where the judges awarded Zabit a unanimous decision victory, his 5th straight win inside the promotion. Later that year, on November 9th, Magomed Sharipov headlined a UFC card in Moscow against Calvin Kattar. They were originally scheduled to meet in Boston, but Zabit had to pull out due to a lymph node infection. As fate would have it, this bout in Moscow ended up being the final fight of his career. Zabit went inactive for an extended period and was eventually removed from the UFC rankings. According to his coaches, health issues began interfering with his ability to compete, and he focused on recovery. There were also rumors that Zabit had lost interest in regular fights and was solely motivated by the idea of a title shot. But with no such offer coming from the UFC, the Dagestani fighter officially announced his retirement in 2022. It's hard not to wonder what heights he could have reached had he continued. With his unique skill set and calm dominance, Zabit seemed destined for greatness, a story that now feels unfinished. Khamzat Chimaev's UFC debut in July of 2020 made an immediate splash. He set a league record by picking up 3 victories in just 66 days. On July 15, 2020, Chimaev, a Swedish fighter of Chechen heritage, stormed onto the UFC scene with a dominant performance at middleweight against John Phillips. It was a statement win. In 2 rounds, he landed 47 strikes while absorbing just 1, and finished the bout with a submission. A mere 10 days later, on July 25th, he stepped into the octagon again, this time at welterweight, and showed no signs of slowing down. His opponent, Rhys McKee, took a brutal 40-strike barrage in under 3 minutes and failed to land a single shot in return. The referee had no choice but to step in and call it, handing Khamzat another emphatic win. Then, in March of 2021, Chimaev shocked fans by announcing a pause in his career due to lingering complications from a COVID-19 infection. Though he had not yet captured a title, he made it clear that chasing bouts wasn't his main priority. Eventually, Boers recovered, but he never quite returned as the same relentless force who once begged to fight every weekend. Visa issues made things even tougher. Chimaev was denied entry into the United States 5 times. Since then, he has competed only 5 times, a far cry from the breakneck pace of his early days. His latest bout came in 2024 against Robert Whittaker, where he delivered a spectacular first-round victory. That win positioned Chimaev as the top contender for a clash with Dricus du Plessis. Yet no official word has come from the matchmakers. Time keeps ticking, and Boris still hasn't worn UFC gold. Fans around the world are hoping to see more of him in the octagon, especially while he's still in his prime. Henry Cejudo Henry first stepped into the spotlight back in 2008, when he captured Olympic gold in freestyle wrestling at the Beijing Games. In 2012, he failed to qualify for the London Olympics and decided to retire from amateur wrestling. By 2013, he set his sights on the world of mixed martial arts, and with a 6-0 record, he earned his spot in the sport's premier organization. His first shot at UFC gold in the flyweight division didn't go as planned. He was stopped via technical knockout by the long-reigning champion, Demetrius Johnson. Another loss followed, this time to Joseph Benavidez. But after that, Henry turned a major corner. Wins over Wilson Reese and Sergio Pettis earned him a second crack at the title. In a closely contested rematch, he edged out Johnson by split decision, finally becoming champion. But Cejudo wasn't done. Just 6 months later, he returned to chase a second belt. Dillashaw came in as the favorite, but Henry pulled off the improbable, finishing him in the first round. He then went on to stop Marlon Moraes and, at the height of the pandemic, defeated Dominick Cruz by TKO. At the peak of his powers, Henry decided to call it a career. By the end of May 2020, he was stripped of the title and removed from the rankings. It was an odd decision, stepping away when everything was going his way. But when you say you're done, you're supposed to mean it. Still, in 2023, Henry changed his mind and decided to return. Thanks to his decorated resume, he was immediately granted a title shot against Aljamain Sterling. Triple C came up short, losing by split decision. His misfortune didn't stop there. Against Sterling's teammate Merab Dvalishvili, Henry was thoroughly outworked and lost by unanimous decision. In his most recent outing, he dropped another one, this time to Song Yadong, via technical decision under unusual circumstances. An accidental eye poke typically leads to a no contest, but the call didn't go in Henry's favor. It's hard not to ask, what was the point of the 3-year hiatus? To return only to go 0-3? Maybe Henry regrets how things played out, but at this point, the past can't be rewritten. Tom Aspinall made a name for himself competing under the Irish promotion Cage Warriors. Though he originally signed a 5-fight deal, the British heavyweight caught fire early, finishing 2 opponents in quick fashion, and soon inked a contract with the UFC. His debut in the world's biggest promotion took place on July 25, 2020, in Abu Dhabi. Tom made an immediate impact by knocking out Jake Collier in just 45 seconds, earning himself a Performance of the Night bonus. Since then, he's stepped into the octagon 8 more times. The only blemish on his UFC record came via injury in a fight against Curtis Blades, a disappointing setback, but one he would later avenge. The rest of his performances were dominant, leaving little doubt that this man was championship material. And he did get his shot, though for the interim belt. In November of 2023, he dismantled Sergey Pavlovich in the first round, barely breaking a sweat. He then got his rematch with Curtis Blades and settled the score, successfully defending his interim title. But behind all of this is one big name, Jon Jones. Believe it or not, Tom has held top contender status for nearly 2 years, yet the fight with Bones has never materialized. Aspinall has made it clear, he's done defending the interim strap. He's only stepping in again for the real one. The issue? Jon Jones continues to hold up the division, unwilling to give Tom his shot but also refusing to vacate the throne for the next generation. All we can do is wish Tom patience. Hopefully, he'll still have enough time to rack up the legacy he deserves before his prime years slip away. Conor McGregor, this man hardly needs an introduction. His name alone helped push the UFC into an entirely new era of global attention. That said, in recent years, Conor's behavior and lifestyle choices have sparked more questions than praise. And it's exactly for that reason he's landed on our list today. Let's rewind to 2013. After making a splash in his debut against Marcus Brimage, Conor returned just a few months later to defeat Max Holloway. And he did it despite suffering a knee injury in the second round. In 2014, he dispatched longtime contender Dustin Poirier in the very first round. Then came 2015, and with it, an iconic 13-second knockout of featherweight king Jose Aldo, a moment that shook the sport to its core. By 2016, Conor had made the bold leap across 2 weight classes and ignited a frenzy with Nate Diaz. He shockingly lost their first clash but bounced back in the rematch to even the score. At that point, Eddie Alvarez held the lightweight belt, and Conor set his sights on becoming the UFC's first ever dual champion. He pulled it off in spectacular fashion at UFC 205. Stopping Alvarez in the second round. At just 20 years old, the future looked limitless for Notorious. But rather than chase legacy, McGregor turned toward money and spectacle. In 2017, he earned a jaw-dropping payday boxing Floyd Mayweather, numbers the UFC had never seen before. After that, he didn't return to MMA until late 2018, when he ran into the unstoppable force that was Khabib. Out of shape and clearly distracted by a lifestyle filled with parties and indulgence, Conor still managed to offer some resistance, though he ultimately came up short. There's a chance that the prime version of McGregor might have given Khabib a far tougher challenge. But now, that's all just speculation. He came back in 2020 with a quick win over veteran Donald Cerrone, but that turned out to be more of a flicker than a flame. In his next 2 fights against Dustin Poirier, he was thoroughly outclassed. Since 2021, MMA fans haven't seen Conor inside the octagon, and the truth is, we probably never will again.